everybody, my name is James Snyder, and today I will be telling everybody about why video games are a real sport. So, this may sound kind of funny to some of you, but first of all, what is esports? Esports is people playing video games professionally. They compete just like any other athlete to play these video games, and there's many of the same requirements of skill and other areas required of the players, and the main difference is just the game they are playing. But many people say that this should not count as a sport. Okay, first of all, why should you care? So, video games are becoming an extremely large form of entertainment in today's market, and they're actually more popular than movies nowadays, and almost everybody plays video games, at least occasionally. So, one of the main sources of the popularity of video games is the esports industry. Esports is becoming a global phenomenon with staggering numbers of viewers that watch esports on a regular basis. And so, fun fact about getting play video games is it's not just for kids. The average age of a gamer is 33 years old, so something to think about. And so the main issue people have with video games is that they say they can't be considered a real sport, and the main reason for that is because they don't fit with the dictionary definition of a sport. There's also a lot of controversy about whether video games are actually good or bad for you. Many people say playing video games is bad for you. So before I talk about esports particularly, I'm going to talk about the effects of video games in general. So, Daphne Baglier is a scientist who studies the brain and cognition, and specifically the effects of different activities on the cognition of the brain. And she's done a lot of research about the effects of video games on the brain. And many of her results are very contradictory to what most people believe about video games. So, video games, playing video games causes bad vision. Well, no, this is false. According to Baglier's research, she's tested people who play video games regularly and people who do not. And the people who do play video games regularly actually have, on average, slightly better vision than people who do not play video games. So this myth that video games cause bad eyesight is false, and it's actually more just caused by bad genetics. Thanks. So, another common myth about video games is they cause attention problems. People who play video games just can't focus on anything else, right? Well, this is also wrong. So, Baglier found that playing action video games on a regular basis actually increases people's attention capabilities. They are able to multitask on a much higher level after playing video games for a significant amount of time, and this is one of the main indicators of a person's capability of attention. Another test she did tested the ability of people to keep track of multiple objects at the same time and track them. And people who play video games are actually much better at this than people who are not. And why should you care about that? Well, you need to be able to keep track of a lot of different moving objects while you're driving. So, if you're better at that, you will be a safer driver. You need more of those in Austin. So, according to Baglier, the effects of video games on the brain are similar to the effects of red wine on health. Red wine can actually be very good for you if you consume it at the right age and in the right doses. But there are some very bad uses of red wine. If you consume too much of it, it will cause a lot of health problems. But when you consume it in the right doses, it is healthy, and video games are very similar to this. So, now that you know a bit more about video games, I'm going to tell you about esports, or specifically which video games are not esports, because most video games are not. For a game to be an esport, it has to be a multiplayer game focused on competition between players or teams to be the best, basically. And all esports have a professional scene where players and teams can compete in tournaments. There's usually large prizes, millions of dollars. And so most games are not in esport because they are not multiplayer games. Many games are just single player games where you can just play the game on your own, do whatever you want, and you're just having fun. There are also many multiplayer games that are not esports where you can go play with your friends, but you're still just playing against a game. There's no actual competition, so they cannot be an esport. So, according to Professor Frank Lance from New York University, these non-competitive games create an endlessly elastic version of experience that can sometimes feel cloying, clammy, and a rubbery toy version of reality. While in esports, every match is made up of unique and irreplaceable moments. The stakes are real and permanent. Much like in regular sports, you're put into situations where you get one chance and one chance only. So, a lot of people say esports are not really a sport. However, I'm going to disprove that. So, according to the Oxford Dictionary definition of the word sport, it is an activity that involves physical exertion and skill in which an individual or team competes against another or others for entertainment. So esports already got the entertainment portion down. But the main argument is that these traditional sports here require a lot of physical exertion, right? How can this require any physical exertion? Well, so based on a lot of scientific research done on the strains placed on the esports athletes, there actually is a good amount of physical exertion required of the players of esports. So, people underestimate this greatly. And the amount of skill is very similar to that of a traditional sport, but the level of exertion is lower than most sports. However, there still is exertion, and it does fit the definition of sport. So Professor Ingo Verbos of Cologne University in Germany has done a lot of studies about the physical strains placed on esports athletes, and he found that while they are competing on a stage, esports athletes can have a pulse comparable to that of a marathon runner. And anyone who runs a marathon has to be very, very athletic. So, another very high physical demand that is placed on these esports athletes is on their hand-eye coordination and fine motor skills. So, the most found that the level of these fine motor skills and hand-eye coordination is unparalleled in any other sport. He was most impressed by the amount of actions these esports athletes have to perform. They perform on average 400 actions per minute, which, if you do the math, that's about 6 or 7 unique movements in 1 second for a course of about a 45-minute game. So that's about 4 times the amount of actions per minute that most people are capable of. Esports also requires an exorbitant amount of practice, similar to most other traditional sports, to be the best, because everyone wants to be the best. So these esports athletes have to practice for between 6 to 12 hours a day, every day, to reach and remain at the top. And it's extremely demanding on the players to do this. So one of the problems with this is that, remember when I said earlier, video games can be good in the right doses? Well, this may not be. So there's been a lot of research done, and people have found that there are ways to mitigate the problems and that can come from playing video games as much, such as carpal tunnel syndrome, where you have severe pain in your wrist, and basically, esports athlete gets carpal tunnel syndrome. They are effectively dead. So the way that we mitigate this is actually through physical fitness. So scientists have found that by basically these esports athletes becoming more physically fit and focusing more on their physical health, they are able to perform better in the esport video games. But the esports require much more mental capability than they do physical capability. So strategy is one of the biggest components of an esport, and in many traditional sports as well. However, one of the things about esports is they require even more strategy than most traditional sports. Games such as League of Legends, Dota 2, or StarCraft require about as much strategy as a game of chess, except they are played in real time, not turn-based, and there's, in some of the games, as many as 5 people playing on the same team against each other at the same time. So, most traditional sports also allow for pauses in games such as football, where the players go get in a huddle, and then they talk with their coach, and the coach tells them what kind of plays they should make. And there's a sort of similar aspect to this in esports, where before a match, the coach will discuss strategies with the teams and like what champions to pick in games and stuff. But there is no pauses for input from coaches during games, and the players have to have a higher level of strategic knowledge of the games to be able to make the correct strategic decisions to defeat their opponents. They also require a high level of teamwork, because even if you have a team of 5 amazing all-stars, super high-level players that don't work together, you can easily get beaten by a team with lesser skilled players that has better teamwork. So this, like most other sports, creates a sense of camaraderie and companionship between many of the esports athletes that is one of, many people say, the main benefits of playing traditional sports. So, this quote, I'm not going to tell you who said it yet, but it's absolutely no question to me the level of skill, training, and devotion required to become a professional gamer. You'll probably be very surprised who said this quote. It's the Olympic swimmer, Michael Phelps, who is the most decorated Olympian athlete in the world. He's won more gold medals than any other Olympian athlete. And he believes esports athletes are real athletes. So let's talk about viewership. Esports are soon going to be the most popular sport in the world. Crazy, right? With just video games. Well, so, 2018, approximately 450 million people watched esports around the world. Of these people, about 221 were regular viewers, and the other 229 million were occasional viewers. It is estimated that by 2020, global esports viewership will be between 500 and 600 million. So if it does reach the higher estimate of 600 million, that's a 33% increase in 2 years. That's huge. So, esports is regularly broadcasted on networks such as ESPN, on TV. But also, many people don't watch esports on TV. They watch it on other platforms such as live streaming websites like Twitch TV or YouTube or other things like that. It makes it much more accessible than some traditional sports that are only broadcasted on live television. So, this is a graph of the growth of esports fans between 2016 and 2020. So this is a lower estimate for the amount of people by 2020 that will be watching esports. But even with this lower estimate, it has almost doubled in the population of people that watch esports in just 4 years. Almost doubled. In the United States alone, by 2021, esports will be viewed more than any other sport except the NFL. That's kind of crazy. And so, people don't just watch esports on a screen though. They watch them live in person like any other sport, and a lot more than you would think. So, thousands of people will go watch their favorite teams play in a stadium live. 2013, this was almost 6 years ago from now. Esports has grown a lot since then. But in 2013, the League of Legends World Finals, which is probably the biggest event in all esports, was held at the Staples Center in Los Angeles, and they sold out the Staples Center in 1 hour. So, the following year, the championship was held in Seoul, South Korea, and there were approximately 40,000 people who gathered in the stadium to watch the esports tournament live. And so, the future of esports shows no signs of slowing down its growth and is soon going to become probably the most popular sport in the world. And more countries are starting to recognize it as a legitimate sport. For example, like the United States and many other countries treat esports athletes as regular athletes for issues such as visas. And it is likely that the esports will even be played at the Olympics someday. There's a lot of debate. It's possible that it will even be played at the next Olympics in 2024. And here are my sources.
Can I have a show of hands who's actually seen one?
You know what?
In this room, watching an esport match.
In person?
No, just even on YouTube or streaming. I'm just curious, like how many, like when you're talking about men, there's a lot of people in this world, but just, I mean, granted, how many and what's going on, and then how do they get their, like, the money obviously is not just from selling the seats, but the.
Yeah, so a lot of games, like for example, League of Legends, which is probably the most popular esport. For example, there's different regions in the world, like, so there's North America, Korea, China, and in North America, there's about 10 different teams that play in the North American League of Legends Championship Series, which is basically the regular season, like equivalent of most sports. And so, of these 10 teams, each one is owned by a private organization that pays for a lot of marketing and advertising, and they get a lot of sponsors from many different companies, including Geico, many different computer builders, and a lot of other companies. And also, the companies that make the games are all private companies. For example, League of Legends is owned by the company Riot Games, and they host many of the tournaments, and they organize the leagues that the teams play in, even though the teams are owned by private organizations.
They have commercials and things?
Yeah, a lot of them do.
Are you on a team?
No, I'm not nearly good enough for that.
Do they have different levels, like, do they have different levels? You know, like there's the big competitions, but is there like little local teams?
Yeah, so like, as I said before, in the regions, like, they play through the regular season, and then there is the regional finals where, like, the best, like, one team or two teams from each region will, like, win the finals, and then they'll get to move on to international events. And there's also college scenes. A lot of colleges are starting to have esports programs where people play on an esports team in college, and they have competitions between colleges as well.
With scholarships.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what else do you
Yeah.
know?
With scholarships.
Yeah.
Like it's a real recruiting tool now.
Wow.
I have a two-part question.
Yeah.
Is this a conspiracy with all your classmates to justify all this game playing? And two, are you saying that red wine makes you a better video game player?
I will say that Red Bull better makes me good one.
I'm gonna try that.
James, do you think there's a leak, or sorry, a link, not a leak. I'm looking at the ceiling, I don't know. There's no leak. Do you think there's a link between redefining athleticism this way and the obesity epidemic?
Never really thought about that, but it might be a possibility because, as I said, esports, although they do require physical exertion, it is much lower than traditional sports such as basketball. So, although like people won't lose weight playing esports, people will lose weight to be better at esports, but esports will lead to a more sedentary lifestyle.
Second follow-up question. We know that the blue screen on phone affects the brain negatively. is this a possibility also with particular TV screens or computer monitors that people play on?
Yes, actually it is, and there are companies that make special glasses that filter out the blue light from screens to protect your eyes for people who play video games, such as esports athletes, for long periods of time.
Thank you.
Those gamers are smart, they're gonna take care of
I
themselves.
know. Any other questions? All right, thank you,
Thanks,
Jerry.
Jay.